Welcome back to Hot Pizza Ass. I'm your host, Erin Darling Taralva. I apologize for the wait. February has been a crazy month so far, but it is worth it because on the podcast, again, I have epidemiologist Dr. Chelsea Shover, who is back on the pod to talk about all the vaccine rumors and myths that are floating around out there. I asked you guys if you had questions regarding the vaccine, and I know you do because I can just tell by the meme culture that's happening right now. So let's bring in a professional and really dissect what is going on with this vaccine and all of the weird rumors flying around there that if you guys listen to the episode, you'll know what I'm talking about. I tried to bring up as many of them as I could that I thought warranted an actual discussion because some of them are just insane. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Dr. Chelsea Shover, for joining us. I am excited for you guys to hear this podcast. Before we get into the episode, I have a couple of things I need to discuss with you guys. First of all, exciting, our t-shirts are back in stock. So now we have more Hot Pizza Ass t-shirts, which you guys can get if you go to my Instagram, link in bio. So that's at darling with 4 H's, and you can get a Hot Pizza Ass black t-shirt now. We originally just had the white, but we sold completely out of those. So excited. But now we have black t-shirts in, and if you were waiting for one, if you ordered one, if it was bat stocked, we now finally have them. So that's exciting. And then second of all, I changed everything on Patreon. I did a big Patreon makeover for Hot Pizza Ass. If you guys go to patreon.com/Erin Darling, you will find my new tiers. I added new ones because you guys are responding to photos. You want more photo content. So I have a whole new tier that is dedicated to people who just want more photos and a way that you can get personalized photos every single month in themes related to Hot Pizza Ass. So I'm super excited to do that. You guys, please check it out. And if you do not have the time or the money to do the Patreon thing, please take the 5 seconds that it requires to write a review on iTunes. It is really the main thing that can help me a lot with this podcast, and it's very, very valuable. If you get value out of episodes like this, it takes a lot of time to put together these episodes, to edit them. I'm a one-woman team. I'm completely independent right now, and so if I want to do an episode about vaccines because I think it would be helpful to the listeners, it takes time, effort, all of that. So if you would like in exchange to give me a rating on iTunes, I will accept that as payment as well. So please consider doing that if this episode provides value. Thank you so much, you guys. Once again, here's Dr. Chelsea Shover, and here's the episode. Hey guys, we are back on the podcast with Dr. Chelsea Shover, who is an epidemiologist and also assistant professor at the UCLA School of Medicine. And we've talked a lot about COVID over the whole course of this pandemic, but now we're in a completely new place with a lot of vaccine questions and concerns, as we've all been seeing on the internet if you have spent any time there at all. So Chelsea, let's just get right into it. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about this vaccine?
Yeah, I think the biggest, one thing that people are concerned, and I'll start off by saying I got the vaccine a few weeks ago. I'm on track to get my second dose next Friday. And there are a lot of reasons that people are understandably concerned or nervous about it. But they're really, for the most part, it's not that concerns are unfounded. They're all understandable and valid, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. So yeah, let's start with that. Biggest misconception. I've heard, I know a lot of people are concerned about how fast it was developed. And what I would say to that is that, scientists have been working on a SARS vaccine since original SARS in 2003. So it's like coming up on 17 years of slower lab work. And then, a lot of drug development and vaccine development is slow, partly because you need funding to do it. And so at the start of the pandemic, a ton of funding was poured into it so that many different groups could, in parallel, try to tackle the remaining problems and build on that 17 years of work. And so the acceleration you see, it's, they still did the trials long enough to assess the typical, amount of follow-up time to watch for adverse events and, issues like that. But the fact that they had so many companies and so many, even like public-private partnerships, just like pouring a ton of resources into it meant that what would normally take a lot longer could be done a lot faster. And, we're seeing now that, I mean, it's amazing. We have I think we're up to 5 that are effective, which is awesome, which is far beyond where I thought we'd be by this point. I think if I listened back to one of my earlier episodes, it'd be a lot more dismal about it. But the fact that it's basically a vaccinatable disease, which is really good news. So that's one thing. I think the other is just that concerns people have about side effects or things they've heard. I'm happy to talk specifically about some, but the thing to remember with the COVID vaccines and with many vaccines, it is normal, and it's actually a good thing to have a little bit of an immune response when you get it. And that's why sometimes, if you get your annual flu shot, like I do, my arm hurts and I don't feel great for a little while. And that's your immune system responding to it. And so it's quite common with the COVID vaccine for people to feel fatigue, like mild flu type symptoms. And then the other big misconception is when we talk about vaccine effectiveness. So when you say a vaccine is 94% effective, what that means is if you encounter the virus after you've been vaccinated, 94% of the time you won't even get it. Mm-hmm. But most of these vaccines are 100% effective against serious illness or hospitalization or death. So what that means is even if you are part of that unlucky 6% that gets it, it's going to be a more mild form. Similar to, that's how the flu vaccine works too. It doesn't necessarily completely prevent you from getting the flu, but it does mean that if you get it, it's probably not going to be as bad. And so that's one thing that's sort of missing in some of the analysis. We hear like, oh, this one's 80% effective, and that's like getting it at all. But all the ones that are out there are like basically 100% effective at preventing hospitalization or death, which is really what we want. We want this to be reduced to be like all the other viruses that we encounter that really, that aren't such havoc, don't wreak such much havoc. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are so many questions that I think that I have and that I've heard from other people, and those are definitely some of the biggest concerns. What do you think is the most harmful rumor? Is it the things that we discussed, or what is really keeping people away from this?
Well, honestly, I don't think it's rumors that's mainly keeping people away. That's a big factor, but really the logistics and supply chain issues that have in the US. So I'm going to talk about this in a US context. It's a whole other conversation to talk about how it's being managed other places and whether the allocation globally makes sense. It doesn't, it's not ethical, but the fact is, it's here in the US, we have it, but the way it's been allocated federally was extremely mismanaged by the previous administration. And so we're now trying to basically play catch up with getting enough doses to states so they can allocate them to clinics and pharmacies and public health departments. And the biggest issue is like not having enough doses and also not knowing the consistent supply of doses. And some states have done a really good job. West Virginia had just basically said no thanks to all the big chain partnerships and just rolled it out through like small business pharmacies. And they've had a really, really good success rate. They've apparently allocated, I've heard that it's, 100% or 101% because they're squeezing more doses out of the vials, which is just fantastic. So West Virginia is doing a great job. California, it's been slow and challenging. But yeah, the rumors are definitely harmful. Misinformation's harmful. Absolutely. And I think we in public health, and I count myself in this, like we need to do a good job of meeting people where they're at, addressing people's concerns, talking about them, and sort of, understanding why people who could get it, don't want to, but honestly, like right now, I'm thinking about it almost entirely as like an access and supply chain thing.
I see a lot of people in the TikTok community because I made a video about this, kind of
Uh-huh.
trying to address in 1 minute some of the rumors or misconceptions, which is very hard to do. And I
Yeah.
didn't have enough time to really address all the things thoroughly, but I saw a lot of people in the comments who had questions about the effects. And something that they love to say is that we don't have long-term tests, or we don't have a long-term study about this yet. Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think whenever you're thinking about a preventative tool, you have to weigh it against the thing you're preventing.
Mhm.
You know what else we don't have great long-term data on? This virus that really emerged a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
But the long-ish, as far as when we're talking about people with like COVID long haulers or people who get COVID and then have symptoms for a long time, I mean, it's not encouraging, so it's not that you're choosing, oh, I get the vaccine or I go to a world where there's no COVID. It's I get the vaccine or I'm at higher risk for COVID, for which there are very obvious bad outcomes.
Mhm.
I also, in general, just being in public health and being familiar with vaccine history and safety data, I'm not especially concerned about long-term effects of vaccines. It's just not a big concern to me. I know that people do have that thing, but like that's I guess if I'm thinking about like things that could hurt you over the long term, like that's not in the top 100 that I would list. I'd put a lot of things before that,
Yeah.
including and especially COVID. So yeah, it's true. We don't have longer term. I mean, I think the biggest question as far as long term data is we don't yet, we have decent ideas about how long the immunity that it confers will last. But just because, the virus has only existed for a little over a year, we don't know, and the vaccine for shorter than that, we don't know exactly how long the vaccine will last, if it'll be like, where you have to get a booster, if it'll be lifelong, probably somewhere in between. I don't think it'll be like every year, but it might be every few years.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, something that I also see people freaking out about is Bell's palsy, because some people did get Bell's palsy, but I think that people don't always understand that Bell's palsy is not permanent in most cases. It is something that goes away.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand how those images can freak people out because it looks like you're having a stroke, kind of. Can you talk to people a little bit about that connection and as a
Yeah.
side effect?
Yeah. I mean, basically, in the vaccine trials that have happened so far, the incidence of Bell's palsy have been higher in the placebo group. What that means is, in a vaccine trial, you enroll a lot of people and you're double blinded, which means you, the person giving the vaccine, don't know, and the person receiving it don't know if they received the real vaccine or a sham, like a placebo, which in this case what it means is not a vaccine, but you get the whole experience where you get the injection and it feels like it. So because it's really important that we don't know, because when we know what we're getting, we have, the mind is really powerful suggesting things. So yeah, the rates of Bell's palsy among people who received active vaccine have not been higher than what you'd expect to see in just regular life. It's something that happens.
Mhm.
And in the trials, it does seem to be something that was perhaps slightly more common in the placebo arm.
Also, with Bell's palsy, it can be caused randomly and it can be caused by stress. So
Yeah.
this is a very stressful time. But I didn't know about the
Yeah.
placebo thing. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about, okay, so this is just a random vaccination association. I haven't heard that much about this in conjunction with the COVID-19 vaccine, but there's always that autism rumor that
Oh yeah,
has,
that's complete bullshit.
yeah, yes.
That's like, I don't know, that's probably like my number one most annoying public health thing. Like I could I could and have talked at great length about why, the study that gave rise to that idea was extremely flawed. I
Mhm.
actually just saw a few days ago some other like body or organization putting out yet another statement about new data that refutes this it's just not true. Yeah. Um, now I know we use the term grifter a lot, but like Andrew Wakefield is a major grifter. So yeah, I mean, there have been amazing, people who have done really amazing explanations of like what exactly was wrong with the first study, but it was just very bad, right? I'm an epidemiologist. It was not a good epidemiological study. And, people have run with it and made a lot of money off of it. And it's, it turned out was also trying to profit from an alternative vaccine dosing regimen. And so it's like the line from bad science to profit is like quite easy to follow there. So yeah, no, it's complete nonsense.
Yeah, maybe we can provide some links that I can put in the show notes, or people can read about this further. There's also a really good podcast episode that I talked about on social media last week. It's called the You're Wrong About podcast, where two journalists really debunk this, and they talk about kind of conspiratorial rumors or pop culture situations that now looking back where we are today are now completely wrong, but we remember them as they occurred without making that additional correction of, okay, well, wait, now we have this information. And that episode talks about that at length. It's really interesting. And I think that also the autism vaccine connection there weren't any favors done by celebrities being outspoken about it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's not, like, don't even call it a connection. There's not a connection. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good one. I have a few other podcasts. I think Behind the Bastards, their episode on Andrew Wakefield was very good. I was happy because I tweeted about how much I liked it and they responded to me and I was like, oh, this is good. But yeah, no. Anyway, yeah, moving on.
That's a good one for people to do their research on. And like I said, I'll provide some links so you guys can read further about this. But definitely before you start talking about the autism thing, please read a little bit further. What about, okay, this is a weird one. I've heard that there's reactions of people who have had Botox or facial fillers.
Is that that's something. Yes. Yeah, that's something there was a public health bulletin report about that. Yeah, that's something that's happened. I mean, I think the thing to remember when we're talking about reactions to the vaccine so far with COVID, the COVID vaccine, what we're talking about is anaphylaxis, which, I've had it like a dozen times. If you've never had it, I was working at a vaccine clinic the other week and I was asking people, have you ever had anaphylaxis? And a lot of people were like, well, I don't know, maybe. I'm like, no, you would know. It's because your throat swells up, your face swells up, you can't breathe, you have GI issues. It's like a total nightmare. The word comes from like a Greek root meaning the opposite of protection, which is an accurate description. But which is how I feel about it. Anyway, so having had it, because I have life-threatening food allergies. So I was in the camp of like, you should be careful, you should be observed just to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's something that can in most, so far with the vaccination, it's been able to be treated with Benadryl or an EpiPen at the scene. And, it sucks to go through, but you recover, and there haven't been issues of like long-term problems with it. But yeah, things like having a history of allergic reactions to vaccines and potentially also, potentially having facial fillers increase the risk of that happening. And that's why it's really important when you go to get your vaccine, at least here in LA County, and I'm extremely confident it's like this everywhere. They have you answer questions before you get it. And if you say yes to one of the things that may put you at higher risk for anaphylaxis, they'll just have you wait for 30 minutes instead of the usual 15. And, just keep an eye on you. It's all stuff that can be managed. Like it sounds, it's not fun. I don't recommend it, but it's really, really rare. And, we're pretty good at managing it now.
Yeah.
But it's extremely rare. Like that's the other thing. It's like, it's very unlikely to happen, but that's why we do the observation afterward.
Okay. So ladies and men, you can still get your facial fillers, but you need to wait. you need to wait.
Yeah. I mean,
vaccinated so you can be observed and make sure you won't be hurt.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't do it on the same day. Like, we always advise against,
Yeah.
Well, we always, one of the other screening questions we ask is like, have you had another vaccine in the past 14 days?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we ask that is we want to make sure that your immune system has enough time to really focus on building COVID-19 antibodies. So like, I mean, if I was going to get filler, I'd wait until 2 weeks after my final dose, but I'm not going to, but you could. Not same day though.
Yeah.
Don't get any medical procedure the same day as you get a vaccine. Like that's just not a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of people probably have not been vaccinated for various things for a long time. I think that, it's something we do as kids. And so people aren't constantly thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I get I get my flu shot every year because like I said, I have asthma and food allergies, and like I'm just like, when I have respiratory problems, I really have problems. And I got my pneumovax a few years ago, and it was the most interesting side effect I've ever had, where it just like the part where I got on my arm just swelled up like a big Popeye muscle. And it was very cool. Just for a couple hours, but
did you feel strong?
yeah, I felt awesome. I was at a friend's house. It was in grad school. It was so funny. And I was just like, what is happening? But yeah. I mean, no, for sure. Like when I got my COVID one, my arm hurt a lot, like the next day and for a couple days. And I was pretty tired. That's been pretty typical. I've had some friends who have had, it's like they felt like they had the flu for like 12 hours, it's rough, but it's working.
Yeah, I have a cousin who's an EMT who actually, in our group thread that I was telling you about, all my cousins are always chatting. And he said, when you get the vaccine, after you get the second one, wait for a day. Don't plan anything that next day. Definitely hydrate, drink your fluids, have some Tylenol, like just, be careful, because he also said he had a fever. But he's like, it was fine after that. But like that 24-hour period right after the second dose was a little bit rough.
Yeah, no, that's what I've heard too. And that's definitely the advice I'd give too, is like, take it easy. Don't schedule something the next day. And it's at least to the people I know who have gotten it. And I know a lot of people who have gotten it. It's been pretty split with people who have had that kind of thing. But versus not much. But yeah, I'm getting mine on a Friday for a reason. Like that's the idea.
Yes, you can rest and relax.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
My friend Simone Boyce from NBC News did a piece about vaccine chasers, about people who are waiting outside of the forum, and they've heard a rumor that there's excess vaccines, or people maybe miss their appointment, and then they can be the recipient of the vaccine in the event that there are extras. Is there any truth to these rumors? Is that an effective way to go? I know people really want this vaccine, so I get why they're doing it, but what is your take on that?
Yeah. So I think one thing, because like I've worked at I haven't worked at the forum one, but I've done the one in the Valley and the one at Six Flags. And, we of course had people come up at the end of the day and like ask, like, are you going to throw any away? And it's like, no, we are not throwing any away. Like the Department of Public Health has, they use all of them, like, absolutely. Do they, and so I think that, yes, there are sites that have waiting lists and lines where people wait. It's not a particularly likely to succeed method. I don't encourage people to do it. And the main reason for that is right now we really are trying to get the vaccine into the arms of people who are particularly vulnerable to bad outcomes with COVID. But yeah, I mean, it is true that if that I guess obviously like that story illustrates like that is something that sometimes works. But it's also like gross to see people, especially in some of the communities that have been particularly hard hit by COVID, and just have like a general, especially like Black and brown communities in South LA. And then you see there's been one of the clinics I've been helping out with in terms of helping them get volunteers to help with their data entry, because like the whole data thing is like it's just a lot. They'll have people from like 30 miles away, like rich parts of LA, driving in and sitting out there. And it's like, I get it. We all want the vaccine. It's not a good, it's not a good look. And it's pretty gross to try to, to try to take advantage of a situation that way. I mean, if you can find places to volunteer, like if you have skills that are useful in vaccine distribution, like that's one way that people who consistently volunteer, like week in, week out, like usually have the opportunity to be vaccinated in the same way that healthcare staff are.
That is a commitment, though. You can't just volunteer for a day. You have to commit to what,
Yeah,
a month,
yeah.
2 months at least?
I mean, it's going to be different no matter where you go, but like that's just like a general, I have been recruiting epidemiology volunteers. And so for them, I'm like, no, you need to work with me 20 hours a week for 6 weeks. It's all people who are in school and like need credit or something, or sometimes if people have a specialized skill, it might be less, but for longer. But yeah, I mean, I'm not I'm not recruiting right now, but what I'm saying is like in general, when clinics or community places need help, that would be one way that, if you're able to do that. Otherwise, it's just kind of just wear your 2 masks and wait. And it's good that there's 5 out there now, but yeah, I don't really have another thing to say about it. It's very frustrating to me for sure.
So you mentioned wearing 2 masks. Is that now the recommended
Yep.
amount of masks one should wear?
Yes. Yep.
When
Because of the new, more contagious variant. So new variant, more infectious. So yeah, wear 2 masks. And the way I do it is I wear my most medical mask underneath. So usually, like, for example, I have a fit tested N95 from my work. And so when I'm out at a vaccine clinic, I'll wear that and then I'll wear a surgical mask over top. But for just like errands, like going to the grocery store or something, I'll wear a KF94, which is the Korean version of an N95. And you can buy them, they're not fit tested if you're just buying them, but they're pretty good because you want a mask that fits very close to your face. And then I'll just wear like a cloth or surgical over top of it. The KN95s, they're good too. Just make sure it fits well to your face. And if you see one that has on the box says FDA approved, it's definitely a scam. So yeah, the FDA doesn't let people do that with masks. So yeah. Yeah, 2 masks is, I mean, part of that, so part of it is because, it's of course because of the more contagious variants that are becoming more common and spreading. And it's also because we have the vaccines. And so there's a tremendous value right now in being able to prevent getting or spreading COVID, even more so than there has been earlier on in the pandemic. So it's worth, investing that extra discomfort or step of wearing 2 and like being extremely safe, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. It's closer now than before. I saw a headline the other day that was very annoying very just irritating, because it said like, no one could have predicted that this would happen. I'm like, no, literally anyone who who has taken basic epi or immunology or just understands how viruses work would expect this to happen. This is what viruses do. Mm-hmm. And when you have uncontrolled virus spread, like we do in the US in most places, they can mutate faster. That's what viruses do. They mutate to become more infectious. Mm-hmm. It also typically means, I will see with this variant, I don't know yet, but it typically when a virus becomes more infectious, it's also mutating to be less virulent, which means that for each individual who gets it, they're less likely to die. But the fact that it's so much more contagious means more people get it in the first place. So even if it's a lower percentage, it adds up to more people. So yeah, this is just what viruses do. And
viruses suck.
Yeah.
Like that's just what they do.
Yeah. It wants to persist.
Yeah. They go on, they spread to more people. Like they really do suck.
Yeah. It is encouraging that it seems like at this point the vaccines are working, but it's really important that we keep trying to control trying to minimize the spread, because viruses mutate faster when they can just spread. And if we can get most people vaccinated before before that happens, like that's better because it means it's more likely the vaccines will continue to work, basically.
And the vaccine that is out, if you were to get it now, it would be helpful against all strains that we know about right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Obviously, because some of the newer variants, there's just less data. We don't know. The data is still emerging about how effective, what percentage does it reduce your chance? But it has some efficacy against all of them. So it's extremely worth getting it. There's 2 now that in the US are out, and if you're eligible to get it, there's basically 2 different ones. Either one is, they're very comparable, but if you get 1 dose of one, you have to get the second dose of the same brand.
Okay.
Because you can't swap them, but they're equally as good as each other. So
awesome. And the other thing that I heard was that people are having a hard time getting the second dose within the parameter of time which you're supposed to get it after getting the first. Can we talk a little bit about that and also kind of discuss what is that parameter of time when you're supposed to get the second?
Yeah, for sure. So for the Pfizer vaccine, the time window is the first dose. You can get the second dose as early as 21 days later. Mm-hmm. But later is fine. It's approved. I think currently it's approved till 42. So as long as you get it at least 21 and by 42 days later, you're good. And the encouraging thing is, for most viruses that we do have vaccines for, the one exception being rabies, if you can space out your doses, they actually are a little bit more effective. So it's kind of to your, it's not a downside and maybe a slight upside to get it a little bit later. For Moderna, it's approved for 28 days between the doses, but it's recommended for 28 days minimum, but it's approved for 42. And it's honestly probably fine longer than that. And I think we'll get updated guidance on that, but yeah.
Okay.
Rabies, though, if you get 1 rabies shot and you wait too long to get the second one, you got to get it again.
Oh, the first one again?
You got to start it over. Yeah.
Oh, man. And that one sucks, too. That one's painful, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one and the tetanus shot hurt.
Yeah. But anyway, so in general, vaccines work better when you space them out a little bit more. So, and also honestly, like the first dose has really good efficacy. So what that means is, it's not to say, oh, you got 1 dose, now you're fine, you don't have to get the second one. No, not at all. Like, get the second one, it'll be better. Mm-hmm. But there's some amount of protection, which is reassuring. Yeah.
Great. So I guess my last question is, what do you wish that people knew about this vaccine that they seem to not know, or did we already kind of cover it?
I think we covered it. I think the big reframe that when I'm talking to people about it, I like to get across is that when you're considering whether you want to get the vaccine or not, and whether you're going to do it, be sure you're comparing that to what the actual alternative is, mm-hmm. which in this case, it's not, I know a lot of people think like, I don't want to get it because I'd rather just like not, I'd rather just not get COVID. And it's like, yeah, me too. Like, I would prefer that we didn't have this problem. But the alternative is that you're at higher risk for getting and potentially transmitting it. And so that's really what you're comparing it against. That's the world we're in, unfortunately. So, yeah, we have a ton of data, more every day, about the safety and efficacy. And I'm hopeful that with the new administration, we can get a better handle on the supply chain, having a reserve, using the Defense Production Act to ramp up. I know the Biden administration is using the DPA to ramp up manufacturing the vaccine. I think having new companies other companies enter the market is also good. In a perfect world, I would say, Moderna and Pfizer, you just release the plans of your vaccine and let generic manufacturers make it. Like, that's what I would like to happen. That's unfortunately, for a variety of reasons related to capitalism, that's not likely to happen. But I think understanding the supply things is pretty important. Yeah, that's probably where I'd end it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hot Pizza Ass. I'm Erin Darling Tralva. I love you guys. Thank you so much for the support. And please check out the show notes. There I have all of our resources and everything that we referenced within the context of this episode that I think would be helpful for you. Or if you're just interested in learning more about the vaccine or listening to some of those podcasts that we talk about that debunk certain things that we discuss here, please check it out in the show notes. And again, give us 5 stars on iTunes. I love you. That is all I ask for everything I'm giving you for Hot Pizza Ass. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.